We're back, part two, talking about strategic approaches to international educational assessment and trying to link the world of educational or the world of aid and development with the world of education. We're doing that today by looking at national assessments or international assessments of education. And you've got some readings that you're looking at that relate to an overview of national assessments of education, as well as some strategies for how to use large-scale international educational assessment data to talk about quality or practice or whatever in education and develop that. And we were looking at how the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia can use the trends in international mathematics and science study data, which is one of those big international assessments, to track itself, to develop its own education system and thereby develop communities within Saudi Arabia itself. And we'd looked at, what does Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's success look like? And we looked at what does it currently look like? And we were focusing on these top two indicators. It's at the bottom of the Gulf and Arab achievement rankings, and it's significantly below the international mean of mathematics and science achievement. And so we could start to ask, well, what does that really look like? And I'm just going to move this around a little bit. There we go. What does it really look like? Well, here is the 2007. I don't have the 2011 here because when I originally created these slides a couple of years ago, the 2011 data was not fully available. It is now. But in 2007, which shows the same pattern as the 2011 data, if you look, here's Saudi Arabia. These are achievement scores. This is close to 600. Saudi Arabia is right here around 330. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something like that. And if you look, the average score is this black line, which is 500. And then it's the scale average, so it's the average that they want it to be. And then the countries that have the green lines are all of the Gulf Cooperation Council countries. These are all the countries around Saudi Arabia. And then I've highlighted Saudi Arabia with this red line just so we would see it very easily. So we can make an international comparison, and we can make peer group comparisons with the green lines. And then if we want to, we can look at specific countries and how they're performing. So we could say maybe Chinese Taipei, which we normally call Taiwan in the United States. We could say how Chinese Taipei is doing compared to Saudi Arabia. And really, so there's some problems with using rankings like this. For one, these rankings basically tell us not much. Because statistically speaking, these are all sample data. And so there's a group that are significantly above the international mean. That would be this group right here. There is a group, a very large group in the middle, that is not significantly different from the international mean. That would be this large group. And then there's a group at the bottom that are significantly below the international mean. And you'll see that Saudi Arabia and most of the other Gulf countries or benchmarking communities fall into the significantly below the international mean category for math scores. If we did the same thing for science, we'd see again significantly above the international mean. Singapore tends to be at the top here. We'd see that there's a very large, not significantly different from the international mean group, and then there's a significantly below the international mean group, of which Saudi Arabia is a proud member. I'm speaking sarcastically. Dubai and Bahrain are in the big, not different from the mean group. And quite frankly, rankings are only part of the story. And so one of the things to think about when looking at international assessment data and trying to link development and education is remembering that rankings are a crude benchmarking tool, and they are in many ways seriously reductionist, meaning that they ignore interesting and important variation between content and cognitive domains. So instead of looking at international rankings like the ones I just showed you, a better way to approach international assessment data when linking development and aid organizations and agendas and education is to look at comparisons in stages First, making internal comparisons, comparing city to city or region to region or district to district within a country first. Then do regional or peer comparisons, and then lastly, do international comparisons. Let me show you what it might look like, however, when you do get to the international comparison stage. Instead of looking at the overall scores, which is what we were doing in the previous bar graphs where I had each country's average math and average science score laid out, we can look at achievement in the content and cognitive domains. So these international assessments and national assessments as well are developed so that they test particular kinds of content and particular cognitive domains. You'll see that we have here one of the target countries, Chinese Taipei, the highest average achievement of any country that participated in TIMSS in mathematics. And if you just look at the average score, I've graphed it here. And I've also added this line, this comparison line that goes across. I'm going to get rid of that mark now so we can just look at it. And what I've done is I've broken down the scores, the student achievement scores, by math content domains, and then we have number, algebra, geometry, and data and chance as the content domains, and also by math cognitive domains, and we have knowing, applying, and reasoning as the cognitive domains. And we see some interesting patterns emerge. So while, yes, 598 is the overall average math score for Chinese Taipei students, and by the way, these are 13-year-olds roughly in the 8th grade, we see that in only one content domain did the students perform exceptionally above average for them, right? And that was in algebra. And we see that in all of the cognitive domains, Chinese Taipei students actually performed below their own average. That's odd, but true. So we can see that Chinese Taipei is excelling in algebra, struggling in data and chance. That was the lowest one right here. Slightly low but consistent across all cognitive domains. Whoops, wrong way. So low compared to their average, but consistent across the cognitive domains. Now, what if we look at Saudi Arabia for their mathematics content and cognitive domains? Where first of all, you'll note that the average score is significantly lower, like half almost. Okay? So it's very low. Okay, we know that. But the way to think about how to use this data for development purposes is to look at strengths and weaknesses. And I'm just going to move this again so that you can see hopefully some of the information down here. So the math average. If we look at, again, this comparison line, we can start to see how Saudi students compare with themselves across the math content domains and the math cognitive domains. You'll note that number knowledge, very low. Geometry knowledge, exceptionally high. And it's really the number knowledge that's dragging the average down for the content domains, because in algebra, geometry, and data and chance, Saudi students are performing their own national average. If we look at the math cognitive domains, we'll see that first of all, there's no data for the reasoning items, which suggests that they didn't even attempt to answer them or that that wasn't administered to them. So we already have a starred problem in possibly the test administration. But if we look at what we do have, we'll see that in applying, they're way below their own mean, and in knowing, they're slightly above. So the most basic cognitive domain, not doing too badly. In the next most basic cognitive domain, a significant drop. So with Saudi Arabia, excelling in geometry, struggling in numbers, and inconsistent across all cognitive domains, but strongest in knowing. Now, this is why internal comparisons have priority. Because look, these are different communities. Chinese Taipei, their strength really is in algebra. Saudi Arabia's strength is geometry. Chinese Taipei struggling in data and chance. Saudi Arabia struggling in numbers. Chinese Taipei is low across all the cognitive domains. Saudi Arabia is actually above their national average in knowing. So if we're looking across these countries, there are no real clear comparisons that we could be making. If we looked at the science content and cognitive domains, we can see the same thing. Singapore was the highest achieving science country. And again, we have our comparison line for the science average for Singapore. And we can look at the science content domains and cognitive domains. And we can see that there are some clear winners and losers. Strong in physics, weakest in earth science. Average in knowing, below average in the other cognitive domains. For Singapore, the highest scoring science average. So they're excelling in physics, struggling in earth science, consistent in knowing and reasoning. Right? That's what we knew already. If we look at Saudi Arabia, again, we've got their average score, which actually isn't too bad. We've got our comparison bar, and we look at the science, cognitive, or content, and cognitive domains. Doing quite well in earth science, struggling in chemistry, high above their own average in applying, lowest in reasoning. It tells us again, internal comparison should have priority. We have different things going on here. But knowing these internal comparisons gives us a way to start to improve. Hey, guess what? If I'm a Saudi policymaker or I'm working for an international development organization that is attempting to improve Saudi society through education, I'm not going to emphasize a lot of effort on earth science. I'm going to say we need to pour resources and time and energy and effort into improving chemistry. Guess what I'm not going to do, or not going to do? I'm not going to be all worried about how students are applying their science knowledge and skills. I am going to be worried about how they're using their reasoning skills in science. This is all just from a basic internal comparison. So, it is impossible to improve Saudi performance on TIMSS if we don't know where the problems are. And look, just from our little basic analysis here, we have enough information to steer us towards areas that need attention. We know which content areas need the most attention in math and in science. We know which cognitive areas need the most attention in math and science. Hey, guess what? Reasoning. That's an interesting consistency. And we know why these content and cognitive areas need attention, because they tell us about the teaching and learning process in Saudi schools and classrooms. Next step would be, how do we think about what I just pointed out, the teaching and learning process in Saudi schools and classrooms? Well, we know that there are many elements that comprise the teaching and learning process in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. If we simply choose one, teacher and student attitudes, we're on the right track. We can do something with that perhaps we couldn't do otherwise. And we can build an analysis and look for evidence to help the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as it develops its educational system. By comparing Saudi Arabia to the regional international average, which we can do in the smart way we've just done, by focusing on numbers, chemistry, and reasoning, and by emphasizing teacher and student attitudes. And then we can look at some specific data, which we will do in the next screencast.